Hello there, Steve here in Sydney on the late Gnosis website truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes doing the beginner's tour you can get physical takeaway evidence of your divine spark activation, and you get an internal mentoring voice, and that's further down the track, by the way. It starts off with vivid messaging dreams, and it's a wonderful experience down a wonderful exciting rabbit hole. That's what Gnosis is all about, and it's waking up to what you are supposed to really be. Can I just tell you something? I've been watching some documentaries lately, and they do tend to, if you've got the patience to watch long documentaries and things, they do tend to deepen one's understanding of situations. Today we all want to watch 10-minute videos, don't we? But there's... I did see a documentary made by none other than certainly about Dr. Jim Watson, who was one of the co-discoverers of DNA in 1948 and got the Nobel Prize. Fascinating man is he. He spent his whole life thinking about a terrible subject called eugenics, and he gets a lot of opposition, and he says in the documentary that he's got some pretty forthright answers to challenge all the bleeding heart liberals that he encounters. And one thing he talks about in this documentary is that the eugenics programs of the German government in the 1930s has permanently bent genetic engineering out of shape, so that's always there, and people always like to ring the bell about that across every conversation, like it's evil. And he admits that it holds back genetic knowledge, etc., genetic engineering, genetic improvements of people, which are possibly coming to fruition, but I don't think anytime soon from my understanding. But he's talking about for a long way down the curve, okay? So, but I'll tell you one thing he said, and it was that he pointed out something with some insight that you may not have thought about. He said we had great advances in physical medicine, and he said, but after 100 years, he said, we still haven't got a cure for a single mental disease. He pointed that out. He says, all we have is treatments that only sort of half work at best. And examples are given of manic depression, and there's a lady who's manic depressive in the show. About a third of her family have committed suicide, and her family tree was drawn up, and they all suffered abominably for their manic depression. And emotional outpouring was made by this leader of the Manic Depressive Association or something. She's written books about how they can be so creative and write wonderful books, and manic people are often discovered through reading their books. You can see they see beauty in things and complexities in situations that really aren't there, but their account describing it is entertainment, and it's called literature. And Dr. Watson listens to that from this heartfelt, passionate delivery from this lady who's got manic depression, because she'd been told maybe you shouldn't have kids anymore, stop proliferating your disease. Dr. Watson just came back with, well, I think we'd have enough human creativity without that disease. Just like that. Just like that. Very, very short answers he gives to these very passionate moral dilemmas that people put to him through this program. So this documentary, made I think in the 1990s, is where Dr. Watson is interviewed, he's asked questions, and he keeps providing short answers to the passionate displays by liberal thinking people. It seems that most of his life he's been deeply concerned with the problem of low IQ, handicapped people and mental illnesses. And he's hoping, from his position knowing about genetic engineering and the possibilities of it, that there might be a way of reducing the number of people born this way. Because he said, You can listen to all the passionate arguments from people that everyone's got the right to life, etc. He said, but why not? Why don't we try and prevent people being born with low IQs, so they have to be institutionalised all of their life? Give them some dignity by a higher IQ, you see. And immediately critics start going on about Adolf Hitler, 1933, etc., you see. So they moved to a German hospital, a mental hospital, where they did something absolutely terrible by your standard and mine. 14,000 handicapped people, ultra-low IQ people, were killed in this mental hospital in Germany in the 1930s. And guess what? Despite all the 100 years since then, there's still handicapped people being looked after there to this very day. Because as Dr. Watson pointed out, there isn't a cure for any of these mental illnesses, including low IQ. And he's talking about eugenics, and 1933 Adolf Hitler was always brought up as a passionate argument against improving ourselves by taking a role in our own genetic makeup, you see. Dr. Watson just says, he's brutally honest, he just says, look, a low IQ is a fucking disaster. If you've got an IQ of 50 or 60, he said, your life is a disaster, it's wretched, it's crippled. And he said, why would critics, he thought critics were wrong for championing the cause of low IQ people who can barely wash their face in the mirror, that sort of thing. So that's how passionately he feels. So Dr. Jim Watson, discoverer of DNA, has always got this millstone round his neck of Nazi eugenics from the 1930s, which is always thrown at him, you see. All he's trying to do is improve the quality of society. By listening to him, he's interested in preventing these people being born in the first place by some kind of genetic intervention. And eugenics is brought up, and you're just emulating Adolf Hitler, etc., is always brought up, you see. So it then occurred to me that what's worse than eugenics, where you get rid of people who aren't good enough to breed and you keep eliminating them? What's worse than that sort of eugenics? Well, I think maybe its opposite is even worse. Anti-eugenics. Dis-eugenics. And that seems to be what Angela Merkel is intending to do with Germany right now, in fact all of Europe, because she wants to put German immigration officers in sub-Saharan Africa to bring in 6 million, that's a strange magic number, bring in 6 million people with the world's lowest IQ who are unteachable and unemployable, just like the people that troubled Germany in the 1930s. Their children, their grandchildren will be the same. So she's actually pursuing what would seem to be a dysgenic program, which to me is far worse. She's trying to proliferate the worst kinds of people. And it seems to be a very carefully considered act. So who would be the worst dysgeneticists? Who would they be? Well, it seems to be a bunch of people who took up the cause of Kalergi-Coudenhove, or is it Coudenhove-Kalergi? I can't remember. A 1922 intellectual who wrote he understood he could stop World War I ever recurring by just ensuring French and German people intermarry and interbreed, and that would stop people shooting their cousins and taking pot shots at their neighbours, etc., and they would all come to love each other and there would be no more war in Europe. Incredibly naive. He was picked up by the Rothschilds and given a job for life promoting this idea, and Rothschild Jewish underlings added teeth to the idea that ultimately they would force white Europeans to interbreed with black Africans. Right? This was written in the 1920s, 30s, 40s and 50s. Okay? So, we've had Nicolas Sarkozy talk about that. from his podium in France that forced interbreeding will have to be considered if you don't agree to this voluntarily, dear French people. So this dysgenics craziness is still being propagated through the EU. And if 6 million people of dysfunctional IQ, unemployable and unteachable, get into Germany, they can then proliferate all over Europe, can't they, on benefits forever. So I'm seeing the teeth of the Jewish addition to the very naive Coudenhove-Kalergi plan that breeding people together will have some useful outcome. In fact, it's not eugenics, it's dysgenics. It's trying to destroy the genetic pool of nations. And it is actually long-term genocide. I regret to say, I can't think of any other words for it. But deliberately looking for 6 million of the lowest IQ people on Earth, you pick it on the IQ map, you can go and look at it yourself on Google, is surely indicative of a deep down hateful sentiment toward European people by Angela Merkel and her controllers who are in Wall Street, one of them being George Soros. So the long-term hate-filled sentiments of these elites utterly appalls me, and I don't know what to do about it. I just don't know what to do about it. All I can do is talk about it and hope you guys come up with some ideas and we can proliferate some ideas. Now, there's a famous phrase, "I've settled science," which is really overdone. We've had it rammed down our throats by the greenies and all that. But I'll tell you something else that was in this documentary, and it's the last. So it's a very unsettling thing, because you know that basically all scientific developments end up weaponised, controlled by the elites, etc. But it goes like this. I'm sure you know that human adults have 23 chromosomes, right? You know that, right? Well, in this documentary, one of Dr. Watson's most promising students is already a billionaire from genetic engineering, and guess what he's doing? He wants to give you another chromosome. Yes, you can have 24 chromosomes. By the way, he's making them completely with a machine that has got 4 containers of amino acids sitting in tubs, right? Sitting in tubs that you just plug into a machine with 4 amino acid pots in it, and it produces man-made DNA that's, wait for it, programmable externally. It might be done with a radio signal or a chemical signal using minerals or something, I don't know. But he wants to start putting, and he's intending to do it, you simply get this artificial DNA, which is totally programmable by anyone who's got the ability to program it, and it's put into the cytoplasm of a newly fertilised cell, and somehow the cellular machinery just happily picks up the extra DNA and gives itself, takes into the nucleus and provides a 24 chromosome DNA nucleus. So how does that grab you? How would you like to be born with DNA that's programmable by somebody else? I mean, would you still have all the same human rights as everybody else? Because people could possibly turn you off, turn you into a genius or an idiot. I don't know. But that's how scary science can get, and we always know that science gets weaponised, don't we? Now, I just thought I'd finish this video by giving you something to be very, very afraid about. So what you can be afraid of, very afraid of, is in fact something like you've seen in the Star Wars movies, the one called the Clone Wars, where they can literally, it can be done somewhere, possibly even secretly, that hundreds of people with this programmable DNA, essentially almost X-Men, can be mass produced by people with industrial power and ability and a lot of money. So that's where we're headed. This is in an old documentary. Of course, I think they say they're doing it in animals only, but that's always done with the intention of doing it with people. Well, you saw what a disaster Dolly the sheep was. She was a total disaster. So she had to be put down, euthanized, because she had about 40 genetic faults, which made her life terribly wretched. So we have a long way to go before this is done, but there's already machines producing totally synthetic DNA that can be inserted into newly fertilized cells and produce 24 chromosome human beings. I'll have more to say about this in the next video.